Welcome to Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine. I'm your host, Jill Jardine, master's in counseling psychology, longtime astrologer, psychic healer, and yogi. In today's episode, my guest is Victoria Reynolds. She comes back to enlighten us about her new book, Transcending Fear. You're going to want to stay tuned to hear what she has to share. Welcome to the episode featuring my guest, Victoria Reynolds. We welcome her back for a second time on Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine. If you missed her first podcast, here's a little bit about Victoria. She's a spiritual luminary and oracle of freedom. She is the author of 6 books, an international speaker, and the host of Fearless and Free TV. Victoria was born and raised in a fundamentalist polygamous cult where she experienced spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, and sexual trauma. She has learned how to see even the most painful parts of her story through the eyes of love. Victoria shares how she came to love her backstory and all of life in her newest book, Transcending Fear. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome back Victoria Reynolds. Hi, Victoria. Welcome back to Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine. So glad to have you back talking about the latest edition just launched recently, spring 2023, Transcending Fear, Rise Above Fear, and Fall in Love with Life.
Thank you, Jill. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation to be here again. And actually, that book launched on July 7th. It launched on 7/7/7.
Oh, so
it is hot off the press.
Yes, it is. That's so exciting. And we were talking off mic about how timely the re-release of this book is. Share with our listeners why releasing a book on transcending fear is so important right now.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are feeling fear right now. A lot of people who are starting to see beyond the mainstream media narrative and can see what's really going on in the world are starting to be afraid of what might be coming because they can see in advance what mainstream media isn't telling them.
Right. It's not what we do know, it's what we don't know that's being hidden or glossed over, such as the economy and the recession that we're in.
Right, right. So when I wrote the first edition of Transcending Fear, I wrote it in 2010. Of course, it takes a couple of years for a book to get published. And I wrote it as a result of what I call my midlife transition, my midlife awakening, my midlife rebirth. And I joke around it being my midlife holy shift.
Right. Holy shift.
And so I wrote it after the 2008 recession when I lost everything, my business, my husband's business, our cars. Both of my kids were diagnosed with learning disorders. My house went into foreclosure and I ended up having to go through bankruptcy. And I was just trying to figure out how to fix my life. And so the first edition of Transcending Fear came to me as a response for facing all the fear I was dealing with in 2008, 2010 during the last recession. And it is a series of messages that came to me from what I call my inner therapist that taught me how to remedy my life and helped me find freedom and fulfillment within the chaos and within all of the fear and the situation I was in at the time. My husband came to me one day and he said, we have $17 in the bank and food in the fridge, and I have no idea where more money's coming from. And from that place, I had to find gratitude. And that's why the first chapter in the book is begin with gratitude. It was all about how do I be grateful for what's going on in my life when it looks like there's absolutely nothing to be grateful for. And so the first edition, the 2012 edition of Transcending Fear, is all about these messages that came to me about how to remedy my life. And so then what I did now is I call it the 10-year anniversary edition. I started writing it in 2020. And of course, books take a few years to publish. It is at the end of each chapter, there's a follow-up of how I used each one of these principles in my family, in raising my children, in the 10 years of life, how these principles were supported my personal growth and the raising of my family. When I wrote the first edition, my children were 2 and 5. And now my son just graduated from high school and my daughter's off in college. So I, when I wrote the second edition, I also included a seventh chapter that was all new information. And it is right up to date. I actually had my publisher stop the press about a month ago. And I changed a couple of sentences at the end to say I got the guidance that I have to also sell my house. And my house closed yesterday. I'm actually sitting here in someone else's house officially.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank
But
you.
that takes a lot of courage to release and let go. We were talking about how what I really like is in the beginning of your book, there's a quote on Kali, the Vedic goddess of intensity, let's put it that way, but of major transformation through loss and growth. And I
Hmm.
liked how the introduction to your book is all about how you share your life journey of spiritual awakening and releasing and even connecting with the divine feminine. So it's interesting the connection of the processes that you're sharing, but also how the divine feminine and what's going on the planet all play into this. So this is personal to people, but it's also a collective awakening that requires people to let go of these old patterns and fear-based realities and what doesn't serve you anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, when I wrote the first edition of Transcending Fear, it when I started writing, I actually was pretty much an atheist. And so when I started at the beginning of the book in 2008, I was just asking myself, how do I heal my life? Where am I going to get some money from? It was all about how do I fix this financial situation that I'm in. What was really fascinating is as I was going through this process, it awakened my spirituality. I had a spiritual awakening while trying to figure out how to fix my physical life. And so the book actually goes through these very, very grounded place at the beginning. And by the time you get to the end of it, you discover that there's a spiritual process that goes with it. But when I first wrote that book, I was not spiritually inclined at all.
Interesting. I mean, I think that's what people need to look at. Like, we're dealing with a material plane issue, let's say not enough money to pay bills, and people want to approach it in a very mundane way, you know, like using their brain when really the intervention is something higher than yourself coming in
Hmm.
this spiritual infusion, the divine feminine who cares for all of her devotees to actually heal something internal that's blocking the reception of resources. So it's that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the divine feminine that does it. So people keep reaching out and asking Father God for personal favors. But what causes the shift is an acceptance of the love of the Divine Mother and her healing of our hearts. And when our hearts start to be healed, that completes our entire reality. And so I started again about 2010. I discovered the divine feminine, and I didn't write about it so much in the book because this book really is for spiritual newbies. But I remember I was with a friend, and I said, "Why is this feels like a woman's movement?" And one of my spiritual teachers at the time, I call her my spiritual mama back in 2010. And she said, well, it's not really a women's movement. It's a love movement. And it feels like a women's movement because the feminine is more in touch with love.
Exactly. And even men are having to connect with their inner female or their divine feminine. I mean, that's really, people don't understand what's the difference between divine masculine and divine feminine. Well, divine masculine is to connect you to source and light and infuse you, but it's not, it's more of like, okay, preserving, you know, it preserves you and preserves your life. But the divine feminine is unconditionally loving. And sometimes think of a mother to a child who's been, you know, not getting the advice that they take away something. So that's why divine mother will sometimes take away something from us, or we need to release it so we can go to the next level and grow and learn. And so this is a process the planet's going through right now, and people are going through individually, but they think it's punitive, and it's not. It helps to catalyze growth where growth is needed.
Absolutely. So one of the ways that I explain the difference between the divine masculine and divine feminine is that the divine masculine is the mind of God and the divine feminine is the heart of God.
Perfect.
And we have to have both.
Right.
And when we work with both of those entities, so both of those energies, we create balance within ourselves. And yes, there is letting go that's necessary. We can't move up into the next levels of consciousness until we're willing to let go of everything that's holding us in those lower levels of consciousness. So transcending fear is all about fear-based beliefs. In order to, everyone's talking about the ascension, like it's some magic, you jump from 3D to 5D, or you're like living in earth and then suddenly you're in heaven on earth. There's a process to get there. And that involves a willingness to let go of everything we've ever believed about everything. And when we start to let go of beliefs that no longer serve us, the rest of our life shifts to follow suit. But people want to change their reality without changing their beliefs, and it doesn't work that way.
Exactly. I mean, we would call that spiritual bypassing. And it's really, you have to go through the subconscious where all these beliefs and programs and conditioning are held. You have to work through the subconscious, thus the shadow work, and look at what the fears are that are holding you back. And it's tough stuff because there's traumas associated and there's actual physical body paralysis in sometimes, and people wanting to numb. So it is a journey to the subconscious to find out how the subconscious is holding you back. Then you can become a soul infused personality and access the higher consciousness, but you can't bypass that subconscious, unfortunately. I mean, not unfortunately, fortunately, or people would be spiritual bypassing, running around left and right.
Well, and there are people that try that and don't even realize it, but there is a process. And if you try to bypass the process, life will bring you right back into it. If you haven't done the shadow work and actually worked through it, that's going to keep bringing you the same lessons until you finish processing it. So,
right, sometimes amplified too. So
yes, I call it the getting the spiritual 2x4 to the back of the head. If you don't listen the first couple of times to the nudges, you might end up with the big whack to the back of your head to get you to wake up.
Right. And here we are talking about it like it's, oh, yeah, easy peasy, just let go and release, but it's not. So how does that look like for people? How do they actually recognize and acknowledge this is no longer serving you? I mean, I think relationships are a good example, but even it's like where you put your time and energy, basically. If you keep putting your time and energy into something and you're not feeling fulfillment, whether it's, in your heart, your emotions, or even on the physical plane, that's a red flag. But a lot of people will just keep like hitting their head against the wall doing the same thing.
Right. Well, and that's actually what the Transcending Fear book is. It's a process that walks people through the process of how to let go of what no longer serves them and how to learn to love even the most painful parts of their story. Because this is all part of, as you were saying, this is all part of shadow processing. When you have processed your beliefs and you've processed your shadows, you actually can fall in love with even the most painful parts of your story. And that is a part of being able to move into a love-based reality. I mean, we all talk about this new earth, heaven on earth, love-based reality, 5D, pick the label because it's all the same thing. The way to arrive at that is heaven within ourselves. And the way to arrive at heaven within ourselves is a willingness to let go of everything that isn't heaven within ourselves. And so that requires a willingness to look at all of the darkest parts of our story, present and past, and learn how to transmute them into love.
Beautiful. When we come back, we're going to go through some of these chapters and what readers might expect and some of the teachings that come with the different chapters, especially with the gratitude, as you mentioned in our last podcast, the portal to prosperity. So stay tuned. Have you ever wanted to learn astrology? This is your chance. Jill Jardine, Master Astrologer, is offering a course. It is a online Zoom class once a week for 6 weeks from September to October 2023. It's time to decode your life purpose, Know thyself. Get the tools to become the master of your life. Wisdom is freedom. Join me for an astrology course in September and October 2023. Stay tuned for more details and how to sign up. So, Victoria, I would like to hear you share a little bit more of some of these chapters, what some content might be, or teachings, or healing words that might come through them. We talked about the gratitude before. I always like hearing you speak about gratitude because your take on it is really enlightening. So I guess we'll start with the gratitude.
Okay, so I started out the book with Begin with Gratitude, and that came to me because I was out walking one day and I was in the middle of, as I mentioned in the first part, I was in the middle of this recession and I had lost my business. My husband had lost his business and my house was in foreclosure. His car had just been repoed. Thank goodness I had my car was paid for. So because he came to me and he said, at least if we have nothing else, we have your car. And a family of 4 living in my car was looking like a very real possibility. And I had heard of the movie The Secret. That was the big woo at the
Right.
time. And I wanted to know how to make the law of attraction work for me. So I bought the movie and I watched the movie, and it was stuff I had actually already knew about from my first spiritual awakening, which was it. I didn't know it was a spiritual awakening. My first experience in 1987, being introduced to self-help books. So I knew a little bit about the law of attraction already. I wasn't completely new to it, but I had forgotten about it over the years. It got set aside for marriage and kids, and I had completely forgotten about all my self-help stuff. So I watched The Secret, and then I said, I want to know more about this. And we did not have the money. I put on a credit card the money and the law of attraction with Esther Hicks was my introduction to Esther and Abraham. And I listened to the program, and it made no sense to me. One, it was too spiritually advanced for me at the time. But I knew I wanted to make this law of attraction work for me because I needed to figure out where to get more money. And so I was out walking one day and I was asking myself, how do I get this law of attraction to work for me? How do I get the law of attraction to work for me? Because the people were telling you about the law of attraction, but not telling you how, because they wanted you to pay money to learn how to use the law of attraction. Well, I didn't have that. And I didn't even know, talking to myself or spiritual downloads, none of those were even in my sphere of concept. But for some reason, I always knew how to talk to myself. So I was out walking one morning and I asked, how do I make the law of attraction work for me? How to make this law of attraction work for me? And what I heard one morning was begin with gratitude. And I remember I was out walking and I saw, still to this day, one of the most amazing sunrises I've ever seen. It was beautiful up over the homes of my neighborhood. And it almost brought me to tears because it was so beautiful. It was purple and pink. And what I heard was, be grateful for the eyes to see the sunrise. And that's when I started to understand the power of gratitude. As I felt grateful for the eyes to see the sunrise, I actually started to feel gratitude engulf my body. And that's when I started to understand gratitude isn't just lip service, it's actually a visceral energy that engulfs the very beingness of us. And that's where I began. Changing my life began with gratitude for a sunrise and gratitude for the legs that carried me on my walk and gratitude for the skin to feel the morning sun on my face. And from there, I began to shift my entire experience. And what was fascinating is the law of attraction started working for me because it matched my gratitude.
Interesting. So I would interpret that you raised your vibration from focusing on the lack of what you didn't have in your life to embodying and focusing on what was good and what was working. So then you're going to be raising to all of what's good, blessings, and what can be received in life instead of what you need. So it was a
Absolutely.
vibrational shift, basically.
Yes. And what's really funny because Esther Hicks talks about the vibrational shift of the stick. And I was like, what is she talking about? Then I understood later, fear are these lower based vibrations and these love based vibrations are all these higher vibrations. So as we start to pull ourselves out of these lower fear based, they're deep, they're very dense fear based beliefs. And so as we start to face each one of these fear based beliefs, and transmute them, it actually raises our vibration until we get to the point where we actually live every day in these amazing vibrations of love.
Yes, and it's interesting because I've gone through these processes myself, but it's funny. The only thing that will bring you out is if you let your mind play, like say, oh, but you don't have enough money for this. Or it's funny because you can stay in those, I call them the bliss states. You can stay in those bliss states like a whole day or for a whole week. But it's funny, there those, if there's old patterns or there's a mental tape, let's call it a mental circle that has been there for a long time, unless you like work through that people, I notice when they're tired or when they're not getting positive feedback, they can fall back into the mental loop, which is then you're out of the bliss until you recultivate it, because it does take some cultivating. But once you're in it, I notice it kind of flows, and it's not like you even have to effort to stay in it. You just have to maybe not go down the mental loop that will take you out.
Yeah, it's also, but you tend to actually not go down that far. I don't know if you've noticed that. So sometimes the mind will get in there and mess with things,
Yeah.
but we can catch ourselves and say, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I know better than that.
Yeah. And, the other piece that I notice when I go into it is like the body is literally buzzing. So it's like such a good feeling, a good energetic, and it's vibration. That's what people don't understand. The reason how we're going to make a shift is through frequency or vibrational change.
Mm-hmm.
And love is the highest vibration. So, of course, you're going to be buzzing in love vibration. And so
Right.
and it feels so good. So why would somebody want to leave that? But again, old patterns die hard, I think. And some people may just, the subconscious will be like, wait a minute, you're free. You're free of me. No, I'm back in control. So it's an
Well,
interesting
and
path.
there's part of it too, in that one of the things I've noticed when those things sneak up, then I look at it and then I start laughing because I'll say, oh, it's you again. I see there's still some work I need to do around that. So these beliefs come back up for us to take another look at and to heal on an even deeper level.
Right.
So if people understand those are coming back up to the surface, not to sink into them, but to bring them up and heal them at a whole new level.
Exactly.
You actually are still moving up the spiritual spiral, but an old belief is going to come back around if it hasn't finished the healing process. But what's great is that you can heal it at a higher level.
Right. So then it really almost like dissolves. Yeah, I've seen that where it just dissolves. And then it's like, okay, that's wow.
And then it's gone.
Yeah.
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 But sometimes it has to come back around a few times.
Right. Because it's entrenched or, yeah.
Yeah. And then we heal it at a higher level. And then eventually it does just dissolve because it no longer has any hold on our reality.
Right. And so this, and a lot of people can do it, get there, but then they will have a stickler. Like for some people, it's the fear about money. So some people, it's the fear, oh, I'm going to be alone. So people have what I would call their master trigger, their master wound that so that's what's interesting too, because it tends to dissipate and dissipate and dissipate, that they can even heal that master wound or that ongoing fear. Because I would say that people have, like, let's say minor fears or fears that aren't as embedded or that are kind of not as intense. And then it seems like people tend to have like an ongoing wound or fear that they've kind of had all their life. So, do you have anything to say
Right.
about that? Like these core, it's a better word, core fear, like the core fear, like oh, fear of survival, which then would be triggered by oh, I don't have enough money, or fear of abandonment or being alone. Oh, I'm not in a relationship. So, do you address that in the book? It sounds like you do, but what would be what would be some information around something like that?
Well, one of the things I've discovered is that these core woundings, these core beliefs tend to be attached to something that happened when we're around, generally speaking, it's between the age of 4 and 6,
Yes.
that we create a belief, unconsciously, of course, a belief about something, and that then becomes an anchor core belief through the rest of our lives. So it does help if you can go back. When did I start believing this? Oh, I can see. So even for me, one of my core beliefs I created when I was 14 months old. I actually have a memory of when I created that belief. And that then looking at that core belief and saying, "Oh, I can see where this came from," and changing it to a new belief back there, it actually starts to unravel in all of the experiences that happened after that.
Yes. Yes, you
Because
tracked
it
it
no
back.
longer holds, if you track it back and you change it at that core environment, then it changes the entire life experience. Then you can look at all the times in your life, go, oh. So one thing that I talk about in there is I had this belief that I fail at everything, and that I quit job after job after job and roommate after roommate after roommate as a survival mechanism. I read that as failure after failure after failure after failure. Now I can look at that and say, oh, this was actually self preservation. This was not working for me. I needed to let it go because this was not a good place for me to be. So we can actually change our perspective about the situation so they're no longer disempowering. So you're no longer a victim to your past. One of the things that's happening in the world right now is the media is constantly trying to keep us victimized to our circumstances. Our belief systems try to keep us victim to our circumstances. Our education system tries to keep us victim to our circumstances individually and collectively. And as long as we are victims to our circumstances, past and present, we are not empowered to change our life. So we have to be able to look at our entire life, like take our life out and lay it on the table and change the perspective from victim, which is underpowered, to power over. So no longer being the victim of our circumstances, but rather being the creator, the being responsible for changing our perspectives, so our stories can actually be a source of empowerment rather than a story of victimization.
That's great. That's the chapter Be Empowered. That's the
It's
content.
pretty much the whole book is
Okay.
about how to take a look at your all. The entire book is about these fear-based beliefs and how to change them.
I love this. And then what is on the other side of that is that people have access to their innate wisdom. It's like the innate life force that we can get through breath and other things. But when you are in touch with the innate wisdom or God wisdom, whatever people want to call it, things like what is being perpetuated by the media or what people are saying or thinking and telling you from the outside, you know the truth. You're in touch with the truth. So you're like, what? That's a bunch of BS I'm hearing. That's not really happening. It does
Right.
give people like a level of wisdom and consciousness that can see through these fake belief systems that are being perpetuated by the media and other systems.
Absolutely. So we start to get in touch with, but in the book, I called it my inner therapist. Then I later realized it was my higher self. But there is a part of us that is connected to the infinite intelligence and infinite wisdom of the universe. And we all have access to it. It's just that a lot of people don't know how to listen. The more we do our spiritual work, our shadow work, the deeper and more clearly we have that communication, so that we can just sit and ask ourselves, what's best, what's best, what's best, what's true. That's the thing that I've been running into the last few years, is show me what's true about this. Show me what's true, because there is so much false narrative floating around out there. I want to know what's true.
Yes, the truth will set you free. That's such a good point because there is so much illusion, delusion being perpetuated that when you are in touch with your higher self, the truth is
Yeah.
just so clear. There's no
And that,
there's no doubt. Yeah.
yeah, and the truth comes from within. That we are the only ones that really know what's true and what's best for us. But what happens is a lot of people actually touch about this on the Listen Deep Within chapter, where people will pay money to someone else
Right.
rather than listening to their own intuition. I mean,
Right.
that's why it's called intuition. You pay tuition within. So instead of
Exactly.
looking for external teachers, go within and the answers will be there.
Well, I'm hoping that the kind of that people start realizing the best teachers are the ones that catalyze their own inner process, not try to be take over their, tell them what to do, but somebody who catalyzes their intuition and their process and their transformational process. So I feel like that might be happening already, that there's so many fake gurus, fake teachers out there. And with the internet, it's like people can't really discern, is this true or not? But then when you start working with somebody, you can see it. So I think there might be a lot of shattering of what is a true teacher. And so
Hmm.
that will help people too, because all the answers are within, and sometimes people just need a little energetic nudge to go there. So
Yeah, or even be taught how to do it. So a lot of people
right,
don't even know they have access to their intuition because they've
exactly.
only been taught to look outside themselves. And it's interesting you say that. It does feel like the age of the guru is starting to fade away.
Which is actually the Pisces
There's
era, the Piscean age, which was the age of the teacher, the priest, the guru telling people what is true. We're in the Aquarian age now, and the Aquarian age is the truth is within, but using all these different spiritual systems, traditions, techniques, and kind of creating an inner spirituality for yourself. I mean, we have been in it and we've been emerging into it for about 20, 30, 40 years, but now we're really in it with Pluto going into Aquarius in 2024. People are going to realize that, okay, there's all kinds of wisdom from these ancient traditions and teachings and spiritual teachers that we can create our own mosaic of how that looks and works for us,
right.
and connect us up to the higher self and source.
Absolutely. Yeah, we actually the ascension started in 1963, which is my understanding. That's when love came back to the planet, and that's when people started having these for lack of a better word, spiritual awakening experiences. You think about the hippie movement and the love and the peace and
And
all
the
of
and
that.
the
That was
psychedelic movement came,
all
the
that. Yes, it
yeah.
was the beginning of this, that we are now in it. That was the emergence of it, and we are now in that. And so what is going to come from this is self leadership. And I remember hearing about 10 years ago, we can't all be leaders. And I thought, well, actually, we can. In that human beings, when they're making their choices from a position of love instead of fear, actually do not need external leaders. And there will come a time when we actually won't have governments or jails or police force or any of that, because we are making choices based on love and the leadership within ourselves. We don't need external gurus. We don't need external teachers. We don't need external leaders. It's all within ourselves. And not to say, which is really funny because people call me a spiritual teacher, but really what I do is I teach people how to listen to their own inner guidance. And that, yes, we will have teachers to teach children, but as adults, we don't actually need external teachers unless it's something specific that we want to learn.
That does make sense, because we do all have an inner teacher, an inner guru, that it's just a matter of accessing and listening to it, as you had said.
Yeah.
So,
And we all have an inner guide and we all have an inner leader. We really don't need it externally, anybody else telling us what to do and how to live our lives.
right. The other thing which was interesting with what you've been talking about, what I think, we've talked about this, about the ascension, the awakening, when people get in touch with these inner resources, these spiritual resources that are accessible to everybody, and they access these, what I call bliss states, or, what we call the integration of the divine feminine masculine, and you'll share what I call it the bliss state. But when there's enough people walking around or experiencing that, That's what the ascension is. It's just a matter of getting, I feel, to critical mass. And critical mass, I think we've talked about this, has changed over the years, where it's like, oh, we need, 50% of the population to shift and wake up, or just 51%. Now I understand it's like down to like 7% of the population to be, walking around in bliss state. What is your view on that, Victoria?
It's actually only 1%.
Boom. There we go.
But it depends on the state. So it was 50% of people who were at least 50% loving.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be at least 50% of the population who makes choices, not necessarily based on love, but not making choices based on the intent to cause suffering. Not based on greed. So there are people on the planet who intentionally make choices that they really don't care about anybody else except for themselves. They don't care who they hurt. They don't care what they do. It's just all about them. When you have enough people who start to make choices based on, oh, this is what's good for my family. I don't want to make any choices that's going to hurt the next door neighbor. So they may not have a higher level of bliss state, but they are in a higher level of consciousness. They're at least making choices that are more loving.
Yes.
They might not consciously be making more loving choices, but they're making more loving choices. And that is shifting. When a person is in that bliss state that you and I've talked about, woo, man, I've been in some bliss states that are like have brought me to my knees because the love is so intense. Now, enough people, one person in that state can holds the vibration for 1,000 people, I believe.
Wow.
Is 1 to 1,000. So I talk a lot about us being the other 1%. When enough of us, and that's only 800 million people, making choices from the highest state of every choice I make is based on what's best for all life on earth. What is the best choice for myself, for my family, for all life on earth, for love of humanity and all life only? When enough of us can get to that state where that becomes the default of every choice we make, that changes the entire planet.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it, and it's quite attainable, which people have to realize.
And it absolutely. And it again does require willingness to let go of everything that isn't that. And it's kind of scary to let go of, oh, what's best for me and my family.
Right.
Or a lot of people don't even use the word term. I use what's in the highest and greatest good of all concerned. Those are terms that most people aren't even aware exist because they're so accustomed to being in personal fear, personal survival.
Like they say in Buddhism and even in the Vedic teachings, for the benefit of all beings. When we start thinking in that term that everything we're doing is for the benefit of all beings, I think that's a big game changer, which is what you just described.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is a good place to wind it down, Victoria. I would love you to share with my listeners how they can get your book, Transcending Fear, and get in touch with you, and any other contact information you want to share. It will be in the show notes as well.
Okay. The best place to reach me is on my website, victoriareynolds.com. I do have a free gift there for people who come to my website. It's actually a book that's for sale on Amazon, but you can come to my website and get it for free. It's called Rise Up. It's all about the Great Awakening and the Ascension that we're in right now. And if you click on my tools page, it shows all of my books. I have another book that I just published about a year ago that is getting rave reviews called Recreating Earth. So if you go to my website, you'll see my programs, my services, my classes. And then another way to find me is on my YouTube channel, which is Victoria Reynolds. YouTube.
Thank you. So they can get the book on Amazon or your website?
Correct. So because it was just published on Amazon about a week ago, when you click on Transcending Fear, you'll get a couple of other people's books.
Oh, okay.
Because someone else has actually done a 10-year anniversary edition to his, which I find really interesting because we both published our first book about the same time, and he's just published a second book. Uh, but you will see it, and they might actually see my first book, the 2012 edition, before they see the 2023 edition, just because the algorithms haven't popped it up to the top yet.
Okay.
Or they can go on my website, click on it, and it'll take them directly to the link on Amazon to purchase it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. You shared a lot of uplifting information. So nice to have you back on Cosmic Scene.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I always love to be here. And of course, any place, anytime I can be of service.
I hope you enjoyed this episode featuring my guest, Victoria Reynolds. Remember to subscribe, download, share, and give us a 5-star review. This is Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine signing out, sending healing, high vibrations through the quantum field.